welcome everyone to another edition of the NITheCS Micro-school, where we share bite-sized chunks of information of introducing a new topic or new piece of software or something easy and digestible by students for students to get introduced to new things that you wouldn't have ordinarily seen or found, or that might seem overwhelming, but given to you by experts in the field that can make it more accessible to get started with. Today's edition is given by Carl Featherstone about introduction to Inkscape, which is a vector design graphics program, as I understand. Yes, Carl is a PhD student currently at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, based in the quantum research group, with a long and storied history in the world of science and software, which I encourage you to go and read up on about in the advertisement for today's talk. But essentially, Carl is absolutely an expert in giving this to us because she's worked as a professional graphic designer, web designer, and software engineer in the field of graphic design for over 15 years. So it is absolutely the person that we want to be learning this skill from. So with that, I hand over to you, Carl, to get started in teaching us about Inkscape.
Appreciate that introduction, Dean. It's going to be a little bit of a loose talk today. I am going to not open a single slide. We are going to do an Inkscape practical. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to stop my video because the screen is far more important. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with graphics, there are... Let me just share my screen before I start talking. It's easier to do. Right. Can everyone see my screen? Or is there a delay?
We can see it. Looks good to me.
Fantastic. There are several types of graphics packages out there. And I think most people are sort of more familiar with the Photoshops and the GIMPs and those kind of applications which work with pixels. So I'm actually just going to start by opening GIMP, just so that we can get a look at the differences. GIMP and Photoshop and these kind of applications, they work on pixels. So, you know, if you zoom into a photograph, you're literally working with a grid. It's all linear algebra. The problem with it is that if you're wanting to do detailed graphics, it doesn't scale. You can take any size photo. If you're going to resize it to any degree, you can do a little bit of mathematical interpolation to smooth edges, but it's not going to scale very well if you needed to go large. So applications like Inkscape, their primary purpose is to work with vector graphics, specifically outlines, which solve the problem that you experience in most photographic applications like Photoshop. Inkscape is an open source version of a program that was called, well, I'm pretty sure it's still around, called CorelDRAW. They all work on outlines. And then the last type of graphic packages you get, which I won't go through too much today, are ones that are intended specifically for magazine layout and newspaper articles back when we were printing that kind of stuff, which is an application that basically combines the Photoshops and the Inkscapes and then has a lot more facility for text. So I'm going to start just with Inkscape. I will explain what I'm doing in a moment, but I am just going to start with a basic little curve, because it will describe to you what we're talking about. And I'm going to remove the fill, which I will show you how to do in a second as well. There are two main selection tools in Inkscape. There is this top one, which is a basic select tool. And then there's the one below it, which is a node tool. So what we're looking at here is basically a Bezier curve. I'm not going to go too much into the math of this, but it is important for understanding Inkscape, because everything in Inkscape, almost everything, is a Bezier curve or a spline. So a Bezier curve, it has 4 mathematical points, the ones at the end of the levers and the ones on the curve. And you can manipulate the curve in any direction by dragging the extra points. Now this is enough to get some basic drawings done, but it's not enough when you want to be able to manipulate a shape into anything. In order to do that, you need to actually get curves that have, come on, double click, 2 arms. And these in general are called splines. The toolbars in Inkscape are very fluid. You will find that the top of your screen changes based on what you've selected in your toolbar on the left. And you want to pay a lot of attention to the bottom of the screen, because as you can see there, the corner node handle, drag the path, it actually tells you what you can do with what you've selected. So there's a lot of shortcuts that you don't need to learn in Inkscape, because it literally tells you what they are. I'm going to briefly cover splines, and then I'll get on to sort of a little bit more general knowledge. I don't want to get too hung up in the math. But basically, with these nodes, you've got a couple of types. You've got ones that, if I click that there, I'm just selecting it. You've got ones that can go in all sorts of directions and be sharp. You've got ones that have equidistance from the middle. You have ones that are uneven, which I think you've seen recently. There's one that's uneven, so you can just adjust one side. And these Bezier curves are the way you can manipulate shapes beyond what you see in Inkscape. So moving on from the curve, if anyone has any questions, by the way, do ask. The tools down the left-hand side, Inkscape's really good at hover hints. So for example, if I want to create a rectangle, I can see there's a rectangle tool. And what you get from your rectangle is basically a spline, as I've just shown you, but restrained in certain manners. So for a square, you can grab the node tool and you can make the corners round, for example. And it remains constrained until you convert it to a path, at which point it's a Bezier curve again. You can do whatever you like with it. You've got the same features going as you would otherwise have. I am going to apologize up front. I've been using this package for so many years that I know all the shortcuts. So if I do have like a 5-second problem finding an option in the menu for you guys, please forgive me. The shortcuts in Inkscape are actually quite friendly, and you will also see a lot of them in the menus. They do have all the shortcuts there. They tend to be quite friendly. I mean, if you want the full dialogue, it's Control-Alt-Full-F. With that said, I don't want to go through all of the shape tools in detail, because again, you know, these are basic things I'm clicking and dragging. They, again, every single one of them has some constraint things that you can do with the node tool versus what you can do with the selection tool. I am going to just describe the selection tool quickly to you, though, because it's useful. We'll do it with a circle. And let's make a circle hole again. Or not. There are two selections. So you will find if you select any shape in Inkscape, you initially get these arrows that show you that you can resize the object. If you look down in the status bar, again, it will tell you exactly what you can do with these kind of things. So for example, if I hover over the arrow at the bottom, it's telling me that if I want to scale this object uniformly, then I need to hold down Shift. That's not something you have to remember because it does tell you, although almost all of Inkscape's controls are Shift and Control, so you will get that. If I want to constrain this to a circle, for example, I hold down the Control key as I drag. Whereas if I let the Control key go, you can see I can get all sorts of ovals and other things in between. The other thing is you can reflect these objects as well by holding Shift. So, dragging up and down will give you the reflection of the object around its axis. If you click on an object in Inkscape a second time, 1, 2, now you get rotation and shear. So for example, I can drag the object skew, or I can rotate it. And this little object in the middle is the center of rotation. So you can go around whatever point you need to go through. As far as the selection tool goes, those are the two modes. It doesn't matter what object you pick. If you select it once, you're going to get resizing with or without constraints, depending on the Control and Shift key. And if you click a second time, you're going to get rotation. I can show that again on a square just to emphasize that point. Once I can constrain it with Shift, or I can do any kind of shape as goes. That's from the selection tool all you really need to know. As somebody who's worked with Inkscape a lot, I would suggest you learn the spacebar key, because sometimes getting around a document is quite difficult, and just holding the spacebar and dragging will get you where you need to be. Then there are a couple of drawing tools in the middle. I'm not going to go into detail with these, but the one is sort of just Bezier curves. I've shown you that already. The other one is slightly more freestyle, but if you go back to the node tool, you'll see again it's just a Bezier curve. And then there's also a freeform pen tool that just does sort of calligraphic type stuff. But again, if you click on the node tool, you will see it's just a Bezier curve. So as with everything else in Inkscape, you have full control just by dragging those nodes and shaping them about what you end up with in that curve. I did want to cover the text tool, because there's two things that are kind of important with the text tool. Like the selection tool, it also has two modes. So if you just click once, you can type sort of any type of text. I think that doesn't have a fill. I'm going to go back to the selection tool. I'm going to give it a fill down here at the bottom. Again, you can see the status bar is telling you how to set the outline and the fill. So pay attention to that bottom bar. It helps when you're learning the program. And I think it might also be a little bit small. opening a dialog for text and font. Let's go with Arial. I want it a little bit bigger, please. Oh, it's not playing ball today. Sorry, excuse me. Let me just figure out why. This is just a guideline that I've dragged from a ruler. I didn't mean to do that. Go away. There is a zoom menu. The mouse button can bring you in and out. View, zoom, for those of you who are looking at doing it manually. Again, when you've been using the application a little while, you don't really want to do that. Where's my text tool gone? Again, same as with every other object in Inkscape, you can drag it freely or you can control and shift to constrain it. That's a weird font. Let's try Arial. I've recently reloaded this machine, so it's not playing nice with me. Nope. The main reason I wanted to bring up fonts is because they are possibly the one exception in Inkscape. I'm going to remove that fill again. If you look at the lower back, the lower status bar, it says shift-click to set stroke or click to set fill. I'm removing the stroke by holding down shift and clicking none. Makes it a little bit more readable. Again, I'm holding control to constrain it. When you input text with this just one-click thing, it is still a Bezier curve. So if you object to path this text and you go back to your node tool and you click in, you will see again that you can drag any of these nodes around to reshape whatever your object was. So the one exception to Inkscape of the Bezier things is also the text tool, but when you drag a box and then start typing. Can we have a full, please? It's got a really large font size, which is why it's giving us problems. Dear Inkscape, play nicely, please. There we go. That's better.
Okay, ma'am, I did put it over there, those things which have changed it.
Johnny, I'm in the meeting.
Your guy does know the code to open gate for us.
I can let you out in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
The main purpose of this kind of paragraph text is when you've got lots of paragraphs, you can wrap it around images and you can wrap it around circles. But it's the one example where you can't really convert it to a path. It doesn't work that way. The other things you can do with Inkscape is you can pull in images. So if you can import stuff from other places. So again, you can pull in what you would normally design in GIMP or Adobe Photoshop or any of those packages. You can pull it into your application. And the same resizing applies. Skew it, size it, blah, 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 blah. Control if you want to keep it at the same scale. And the nice thing about pulling in photographs is if you want to sort of add graphics on top of that, this little dropper tool allows you to actually pick up colors from the image. So you can, in fact, pick up photographs into your image and design the two of them together. There are also options, for example, to take shapes like circles. See if I can close that. Don't want you there. Ugh. There we go. Ah. Precision. I want a circle, please. Thank you. You can take text and wrap it around objects. So my text tool again. I'm going to scale it larger. I'm going to remove the fill from this. Again, the status bar at the bottom is telling you what you need to click to use fills or use outlines. So I'm going to remove it again, which is there. I want to see an outline, so I'm going to shift click to get the outline. And then again, the space bar is really useful. You can take that object, take the circle, and tell it to put it on the path. Where is it? This was the one thing that there we go, put on path. And then you can use the node tool to move it around as you need to. And if you want to keep that circle there because you want to keep the text controlled, you can just remove the outline and then you've got a curved piece of text. Other things you will need for the application, there is, sometimes it's available on the right-click menu, but it's also available on the object menu. You sometimes need to lower items behind others. I tend to use the page up and page down keys. They work pretty well for that. So for example, if I want to send that object to the back, it goes behind the image. I wouldn't go too much more complicated than that because Inkscape really isn't that complicated once you've got the basics down. Once you've learned how to click an object and you've learned how to scale them and you've learned a little bit about nodes, an image will only have the ones on the corners. There's not a lot else to Inkscape. It's got filters and extensions and fancy things, but you can do most of what you need with what I've just shown you now. So I actually think I'm going to leave it there. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Carl. That was really interesting to learn about. So yeah, I'd encourage if anyone has any questions, they can drop it now. I see there is one question in the chat so long, asking if you would get the output file as a JPEG or a different file extension. And I imagine there's probably options. Yeah.
Vector-based graphics are saved as, it depends on the application you're working with. For example, a CorelDRAW file would save with the extension CDR. Inkscape tends to save with its own extension, but also since they've standardized scalar vector graphics, which are often used in web design, which are also vectors, a lot of these applications nowadays will save as the .svg extension of scalar vector graphics, because you can, in fact, embed these graphics into web pages. That kind of stuff has standardized over the years, which is great. But you can also export it if you want to a JPEG or a GIF or a PNG or that export menu. Will allow you to export into any extension that you choose. In this case, ping. But yeah, you wouldn't necessarily want to keep an Inkscape or CorelDRAW program as a JPEG or a ping, because after you've done that, you can't. Oh, I've lost my browser. There you go. Because after that, you've obviously lost the ability to scale and edit the application. If that answers the question.
Sure, I imagine so. I think, yes, the exporting function will solve that problem. I see there's another question. If you quickly go through it again, how to do the curving of the text and wrapping it around the circle like you did. I was so impressed to see how easy it is to make nice text like that.
Yes, I can go through that again. Let's do another shape. I'm gonna delete everything here.
And if you
Again,
could
space
reshare your
bar,
screen.
space bar is your friend. I'm going to take, like, let's say, let me do a nice little shape like that.
Sorry, Carl, could you reshare your screen so we can see?
Oh, sorry, did I unshare? My bad.
No worries.
There we go. So I've drawn a shape. This is not a closed shape. I'm going to remove the fill and give it an outline so we can see it. And then I'm going to take a text. I'm not going to do the square box. I'm just going to click. Type something funny. Selecting it. Again, I'm going to hold Control so that I hide that sharing box. It's not helping. I'm going to remove the outline on that because I can see there's an outline when there shouldn't be. And I'm going to give it, pick a color. And then it depends on the order that you select it in. So you do want to choose the text before you choose the path. And then just text, put on path. And again, you can hide the path if you want to. Yeah, this is a 101. This program gets very, 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 very advanced. But if you know these basics, picking up the rest of it becomes a lot easier. Something else you might want to know about, if you do have a couple of shapes, let's give those some fills. There is an align dialog. Yeah, I did mention this would be a problem. There it is at the bottom. Where you can kind of, you can make them all align at the right or at the top, or equally distributed. That's pretty useful, especially when you're trying to align different types of texts and that sort of thing. I also haven't gone into the more advanced full dialogue. This one, where you can kind of set stroke paints and that kind of thing. But it's not, I find Inkscape to be reasonably user-friendly in terms of hovering over stuff and hints and telling you what you need to do. Once you know the basics and that it's an outline and that you can work with these bezier curves, everything else just follows. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm sure that recovers it, or made it clear to me at least. Yeah, thank you, Carl. It's very interesting, and I'm sure there will be a follow-up micro-school to get into the more advanced things, but we'll get to that at another time. But for now, yeah, I think it was very useful to see the introduction and how to get started with it, and that it's very easy to learn through the little tips and tricks and extension. I mean, and the helpful tips that it has at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, you made it very easy and accessible for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate it. It was a good talk.